My experience in the United States and Latin America as well is there's this incredible positive stereotype of Australia. And we've seen success in all sorts of fields, from decision support software to but the real positive stereotypes are in sport, John's field, in booze, in Tasmanian food, in water technology. So, when you in Silicon Valley and people in Boston and elsewhere are thinking Australia, is there an advantage to coming in one of those categories where people say, hey, that makes sense, these are Australians, they know the field?
Yeah, well, we were talking about it before. I'd be interested in these thoughts as well, but we were talking about it before that you kind of need one to start the ball rolling. And the first one that started the ball rolling in this country was for sure Atlassian. Now, there were a number of incredible regional kings, from car sales to REA to these companies that adapted things for this part of the world. Great businesses, wonderful. But the one that really tipped was, I think, Atlassian. And if you think about Silicon Valley itself, it tipped when Hewlett-Packard and before that, the founders that came out of that kind of emerged as a new generation of entrepreneurs and VCs. That's when it goes. And that's what's happening now. And I mean, you tell me what percentage of your funds are owned by those folks from Atlassian or Atlassian Association. It must be probably, will you tell me what percentage is?
Of our funds.
Of your funds come from the founders of those companies or anyone associated with it?
So the first fund is all from Aussie founders.
Yep.
The second fund, 2 super funds came in, so it's 20% from them and 80% from the super funds. But by numbers, it's
probably still pretty high.
It's high.
So the ball starts rolling, and
Yeah.
I think as an Australian looking at Australia, I think the questions I asked, and I'd love to hear from Didier here. The immediate sort of response is, I get how you can build a product in Australia. Like the engineering is just great, Monash University, wonderful computer science education, and there's others, in this part of the world. I guess there's 10 out of the top 100 engineering schools are from Australia, which is pretty amazing. So the engineering side of this thing, I get why the product would be good. But tell me now how you're going to sort of enter and penetrate, the US marketplace or the European marketplace or whatever it might be. Where's that chops coming from? And Didier, I'd be fascinated to sort of hear how you approach that.
Sure, and I think just to also sort of directly answer the question, my personal view as an entrepreneur, which is always contrarian, is there's no point going where we're known for. I don't go on trade missions. I don't join other groups. I don't go to these other places. I get lucky, blessed, whatever. In my previous life, I worked for Hollywood. We're in a company in Adelaide doing work for Hollywood. So I kind of had into my head that it was possible to do this from anywhere. And so when I started this thing, and so why is it that Adobe asks us to help them with their people and culture? I don't know. Nobody else gave them what they needed. We were foolish and naive enough to think this problem needed to be solved, and we banged on the door until they let us in, and then we showed them something that they thought was better than everything else. And so for me, that's the most important thing. That said, we draw a lot of inspiration from those fields. I'm from Adelaide, so winemaking is a huge thing. You look at that, that's where the creativity and the ingenuity comes from, and that's what we get inspired by. But a lot of it is turning up, getting over there, realizing that, and I learned this in Hollywood as well, when we were competing against LA companies. For a lot of people we were competing with, it was just a job. For us, it was everything. It's still true. You go to the Valley, 2/3 of the people working in those companies don't feel like they're working in a startup. They're earning a good wage at a big business. They're not startups. I mean, they're multi-billion-dollar companies. And so for us, that's what we had to harness and build, and people respond to it. They just want people to care about their problem, which is why I think the category king thing works, because if you do it well, you're articulating to somebody that you understand their problem like nobody else, and that opens so many doors.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is that if you go to a doctor and you've got a sore knee and the doctor says, I know that exact problem, it's this, and this, you immediately think, well, that guy knows the answer too, right? So that's the whole point you're making, which is category kings do that. They frame the problem in a way that makes you think, oh, gee, of course, he's going to know the answer better than anyone else. Rick?
No, I just want to say something to the category of Australian success. I actually really don't like that way of thinking. I don't want people to say, we should do mining tech in Australia and ag tech and sport tech because we're good at them. Because that just pushes founders into thinking they can only do that stuff. There's this kind of mentality in Australia of, oh, we couldn't do that in Australia. We couldn't build a space business in Australia because that's what they do in the US. So we just backed 2 space companies in Australia, and I think we're going to kickstart the space industry in Australia, and we're going to make boatloads of money doing it. And there's no reason why that can't happen in Australia. There's no reason why the solution to the LiDAR, which is going to unlock the new automobiles, not using the word driverless cars, can't come from a Sydney, a Sydney-based company. I get people in Silicon Valley saying, "Oh, whoa, it could happen in Australia." Of course it could. We don't need to be defined by these historical things that we were good at.
My question is there an advantage to being in one of those fields?
Absolutely.
You drive Route 66, the favourite beer is Foster's. So a start-up in beer coming out of Australia or beer technology is more likely to succeed than someone coming from Argentina or Chile.
I
The
just
largest alcohol company in the world is from South America.
So they own
Yes, exactly.
I understand what you're saying. I just don't like that articulation of how we should build our startup and innovation industry. I think that's the wrong way for us to think about it because it stifles innovation.